Welcome to the Story Talks Back. Almost everything that we remember, think about, or imagine is a story. Stories entertain us, inform us, and even define us. They have upsides, and they have downsides. This podcast explores the power of story in every aspect of our lives. I'm Dave Stanton. Thank you for joining us. Bob Minkin's photographs have documented 4 decades of rock music, with a special focus on blues musicians, the punk scene of the late 1970s, and jam band music typified by the Grateful Dead. He's photographed thousands of concerts, and his work has appeared in countless music publications and books, as well as on CD and album covers. Minkin has published 3 elegant collections of his images: Live Dead, The Music Never Stopped, and Just Jerry. A graduate of New York's School of Visual Arts, Minkin now lives with his family in Marin County, California, and continues to document the music scene there and across the country. It's great to welcome you to the Story Talks Back, Bob Minkin, and thank you for taking the time to speak to me.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
I want to start out by talking to you about stories and storytelling in your past. I think a lot of creativity can be seen as different forms of storytelling. And I was wondering if there was people in your childhood who were storytellers, or if there were stories that were important to you and your family when you were growing up.
Yes. At a young age, first of all, my grandparents, my grandmother, wrote poetry. My grandfather was a writer,
Huh.
A philosophy kind of guy.
Okay.
They're from Europe, from Poland and Russia. And so they exerted a strong influence on my life. My grandfather had a library of books and stories, and he liked anagrams and fables. What made a big impression on me as a young kid is I had a fascination with Greek mythology. So I knew more about Greek mythology probably than any other 10-year-old. I forgot some of the stuff, but I still dig it. And those are lots of great stories and fables and stuff like that. So that exerted a big influence. Anybody who knows me a long time knows that part of me.
And when did you start to see yourself as a creative person or someone who might tell stories in some form?
Well, I was always had the inclination of artist type stuff. I always drew pictures. People know me now mostly as a photographer, but I started out as a painter and draw and sketches and things like that. So that's really the beginning of the creative stuff. And then I wound up going to art school where I painted every day and stuff. And
where did you go?
To the School of Visual Arts in New York.
Oh, nice. Very nice.
But I went to summer art series like at Brooklyn Museum, the Brooklyn Museum, and we used to go to Prospect Park to draw.
Great.
I used to just take the train from where I grew up in Canarsie in Brooklyn, just by myself as a 17-year-old, just take the train into Prospect Park or Central Park and with a sketch pad, or I draw people on the subway too. So that was an outlet for my creativity, and then photography started engulfing that.
So how did that start happening? How did you get exposed to photography, so to speak?
Well, my aunt, my mother's sister, gave me a Kodak Instamatic camera when I was about, I think, in 6th grade. So I started taking it around the neighborhood and photographing like my neighbors. And then in school, they let you, in junior high school, they let you bring a camera to school day, So I started taking pictures of my classmates and my teachers. And, I always had a documenting or / collecting personality. I had super into stamp collecting, comic books, Mad Magazine and all that stuff. I used to draw the pictures out of the comic books and
Huh.
try to make story, like framed stories like they do in comics. It's very difficult. And so with the Kodak Instamatic, when I got about when I started going to concerts, this was like a new hobby for me, like just like stamp collecting and building model rockets, going to concerts. So when I was 15, I one of the first shows I went to was New Riders at a Purple Sage show at the Academy of Music in New York, and I took my little Kodak with me and took my first concert pictures. It's like, wow, these aren't that bad. I mean, it's kind of laughable now when you look at them. I still have them, um, but I was like, something for my scrapbook, something that I can put there with the ticket stub and the advertisement out of the Village Voice, because that's just the way I am. I have tons of that stuff.
I'm totally the same way.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what my kids are going to do. Well, that has so much stuff. So donate it to some music museum or something.
I hear you. So, I mean, over the years, you must have sort of gotten a sense of what it is that about a certain framing or a certain thing that you're seeing that makes you want to take a picture or makes you feel that it's time to take a picture. I mean, do you have a sense of what that is?
Yeah, it's hard to really, it happens without me really even thinking about it, especially now since I've been doing it for so long. Even when I'm driving in my car or, well, I go for a hike, I always have my iPhone with me. I'm always taking pictures. But let's say if I'm driving, I'm always looking, I always see scenes that in my mind is a photo, because it's a matter of, like I said, I used to draw and paint and study the Renaissance masters. That's like what I used to try to copy their paintings. So they had the whole sense of foreshortening and, the like in photography, we call it a hero image, and then a smaller subsidiary image and how they relate to each other, like not framing things dead center, but putting things offset a little to add dynamicism and tension to the image.
Uh-huh.
So I just see that stuff now. It's, I guess, just what people who have been doing that or creative people just can't help but to see it. So for example, when I'm at a concert, it's almost a second intuition. Like I'd be talking to somebody quietly during a song, not to disturb the artist or people around me. But
Right.
then I just sense like something's happening, I could hear it in the music or whatever, and I just whip the camera around and just there it is, like bang. I mean, it's just like I just see it, like it's just right, it's so obvious sometimes to me. And other times I take a picture anyway and I look at it, and I go, nah, that one didn't work.
Do you feel like a successful picture is telling a story?
Exactly. To me, let's say using concert photography as an example, my goal, well, I'm not really thinking about it at the time, but ultimately the goal is to have the viewer like feel like they're there, like they can almost sense it. Like I've heard people tell me or comment on the photos that they could hear the music, or they feel like they're there, even if they weren't there. Of course, if they were there, it's even, it's more special in some ways. And with the landscape shots, it's a shot that makes people like I'm in the business of happy in a way. Like I want, when you see this landscape, it gives you, it just gives you hope and beauty, like that there's a better thing, out there. So
That's interesting.
it's the same thing. Like if I'm flying in my plane and over the Golden Gate Bridge area, like I get the Golden Gate Bridge as the hero element, and then San Francisco downtown, a little off to the left in the back is the subsidiary element. And it's just, it can work really well sometimes.
Mm. Um, I mean, rock music itself, how did you get drawn into being so involved in taking pictures of rock music?
Well, like I said, when I first started going to concerts or shows, I wanted to have something for my scrapbook, essentially, you know. And then I subscribed to I looked at all the music magazines of the day and saw these incredible photos. And it's like, wow, I don't know, can I ever do something like that? I mean, it just seems so far-fetched.
Uh-huh.
And nowadays I'm actually friends with some of those photographers of my youth. And
Huh.
so, I just really started out as to have something for my scrapbook, something for me from memory of that particular event. But, as it went on, just the way things happened, like I met somebody that introduced me to the publisher of this magazine called Relics that focused on that kind of stuff, the
Sure, sure.
Grateful Dead, hippie sort of music, Hot Tuna, Jefferson Airplane, and all that.
Right.
And I brought some of my early photos and drawings over to his house because the publisher, Les, he lived in Brooklyn too, on Ocean Avenue and Kings Highway.
Huh.
So, he was like, "Whoa, these are really good. Hey, you could publish them. We'll pay you, $15, for a photo." I was like, "Really? Like you'll pay me for this?" So that sort of was like, wow, you could actually get paid doing this. So I just started. I mean, that wasn't the reason, but I mean, that just gave me more of an impetus. The fact that somebody in a more of a professional capacity putting out a magazine liked the photos enough to publish them. So that, that's a real shot in the arm when you're like 17, 18 years old. It gives you a
Sure.
big boost, of confidence
Yeah.
to do
And
more of it.
say what?
To do more of that,
Yeah,
like when
yeah.
I went out to see the Dead at Red Rocks, I was like, oh, I'm gonna take a lot of pictures here. This is going to be a special place. If you've ever been to Red Rocks, it's
I actually was there once. I didn't see a show, but I just happened to be there during the day.
yeah.
And Joni Mitchell was going to be there that night, but I had to catch a plane, so that
Oh,
was
darn.
that was a
But you
big
got a
miss.
sense, yeah, but you got a sense of the uniqueness of that venue. So
It's crazy, beautiful. Um, it's funny you talk about heroes because when you think about lead singers and rock bands in general, but particularly the lead singer is such a hero figure, right?
yeah, the person, like, for example, like, drummers have a tough thing, the light's not usually good on them and they got a lot of stuff in the way,
Right,
so in the hierarchy of picture taking, unless you specifically, if it's set up in a way or I have the flexibility, I can go on stage and shoot close, but if you're shooting from the audience like I did as a kid, it's tough. Certain, so the people out front, usually the lead guitarist or the lead singer gets all the the light and the focus. So
and there's obviously a story for you as a photographer of each picture and each concert and your experiences, good and bad. I mean, did getting the special access actually change kind of the whole experience for you, and how did that change the sort of the story of each concert for you?
well, that was certainly a big boost. I mean, prior to that type of stuff happening, I was just extremely determined. I mean, determined like sleep out all night at Grand Central Station in New York to get good close-up seats,
Right,
or getting to a concert a day early to get online.
right,
Stay out all night, like, wait out all night on a cold April night in New York at the bottom line to get tickets for, Garcia and Saunders there. So, I was determined, very determined. And I had, it caused a lot of problems too as a kid, because I was still in like high school and, I had
Mhm.
normal parents that were not, like, what the hell are you doing? Kind of thing. Like, so, that caused some issues back then. Because now my parents are very proud of me. Oh, you just said, I go, yeah, well, remember when I was 17, you weren't so proud of me. So
Right,
I,
right,
that is, my books are proudly displayed on their coffee table. But but there's some key moments that happen in people's lives that advance them, right? So
right,
one was, meeting the publisher of Relics when I was 17. Another one was, well, I'll skip ahead, but I mean, another major one was meeting the Grateful Dead's publicist, Dennis
mm,
McNally. My mutual friends, Lisa and Sandy, introduced me to him in 1985.
huh,
And, he was a gatekeeper, he's a person that dealt with photographers and stuff like that. And most of the time, it's just a one-off thing. Here, okay, you could shoot you 3 songs, and that's that. But we
mhm,
actually hit it off, like, because I worked for the company that published his first book, his Jack Kerouac book. We had certain things, to talk about and stuff. I worked for McGraw-Hill at the time. I was an art
oh
director,
wow, okay,
and and so he, really, I got the keys to the kingdom in a sense. He started, like I said, we hit it off, and he made it. He opened some doors for me, and what that meant was that I didn't have to wait out all night online for tickets, certain things like that I didn't have to do,
Uh-huh.
which I didn't miss. And then it led to other things, in my other life. I'm also just a graphic artist. So he opened the door to me for me to become the packaging designer for Grateful Dead Productions for a number of years in the early 2000s.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I don't really talk about that a lot, but that, like designing an album or CD, album for your favorite band, was always a fantasy of mine as a kid.
Wow.
So I
Wow.
got to, and I'm still involved with them. They moved that whole operation to LA with Rhino Records, but they still use my photos frequently in their packaging, which is cool. So yeah, Dennis was, hero, and there's just certain people you meet along the way that just angels, I call them, angels from somewhere come into your life, and
Do you
hopefully,
remember sort of before you had that access, do you remember sort of like the most memorable thing that you did to get a good photo?
well, waiting all night online and waiting for hours and hours and hours, in a crushed crowd to, get there early and stuff. But, really like traveling. I mean, when I was 22, I didn't have access to time, but I went to Europe to follow Grateful Dead tour. So, and there really weren't any other people taking pictures on that tour.
Hmm.
And they played in some unique places, that I'm pretty much one of the only people that have photos of some of these things that
Wow.
have become like stuff of legend in that world.
Wow. And apart from your connection to relics, I mean, what do you think it was that drew you to the Dead, to that whole scene or those people?
Oh, well, that all kind of came about, I was 13, I started hanging out with a different crowd, and, you know, getting exposed to music, like Led Zeppelin and Allman Brothers, and Jimi Hendrix. I love, Jimi Hendrix was really my first real love of music,
Huh. Okay.
at that point, he'd already been gone a few years, so I missed the boat, but it was just really exciting. It was boring as a kid growing up. There's not a lot going on. So this was like a real thing of excitement. And I always have like, I always had a big sense of adventure. I always wanted to do things, exciting things, and travel and stuff like that. But as a kid, you really can't, not easy to do that. Living Brooklyn middle class life, and, just visiting your grandparents every weekend, which I wish I can do now. I'd love to do that now, but that boat has sailed. But the music was exciting. The people I was hanging out with were exciting. The things we were doing were exciting. Getting high, music, and all that. And the Grateful Dead, out of all of them, I still love all those bands, but the Grateful Dead had a lot of storytelling. Incredible storytelling that just conjured up these things in your mind. Like, they never were very overt in sort of telling you what to think in the song. They left a lot of it wide open, you know. And it, it it just filled me with a sense of adventure. So, and then when they didn't play the same show twice. That was the other thing. I found out that a lot of artists play the same show twice. When I went to see Jethro Tull 2 shows in a row, first times I saw it at Madison Square Garden, they played the exact same show. Even with the banter was the same. I was like, what's this? It's the same show. I didn't realize that most bands rehearse for a tour, and they pretty much do the same show every night. They may move some things around here and there, may do a different encore. I was shocked. But the Grateful Dead never played the same show. In fact, in the 3 shows, you might not see the same songs played, twice. And if they are played, they're played differently. So it was just that whole thing, and they're playing in other cities. So, as a young kid, it may not seem a big deal now, but when you're 16 in New York going to see a concert at the Tower Theater in Philadelphia, I was like, wow, going to Pennsylvania. I've never been to Pennsylvania. It's just an hour and a half drive, but I never done it before. So, and that's the same thing, like going to Colorado or Arizona or coming out to California for the first time. It was all involved because of the Grateful Dead and their songs and that sense of adventure, and the stories they told in their songs about the Cumberland Mine, in West Virginia, or panning for gold in the gold rush and the song Here Comes Sunshine. As a kid, I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know what they were singing about, but gradually it's like, oh, wait a minute, put down, pick up the pan, don't just stand there dreaming. Pick up the pan, the gold pan, here comes sunshine, the gold, sunshine's the gold. So, you learn things and figure it out as things go on.
That's so cool. And the way that they construct the shows different each time kind of makes each show a story, right?
Oh yeah, no, like some stories, it's some are flubs. It's like, oh, that wasn't that good. But some are, at a mid-level, yeah, that was good. And some of the sublime ones. So the sublime ones were the reason I kept coming back. I wanted to catch the sublime one, and I didn't want to find out that the sublime one happened on the Sunday night show that I didn't go to. Like I went the Friday and Saturday, but I didn't go Sunday. Oh, that was the night that you wouldn't believe it, And I was like, I hate you.
I've had that feeling so many times.
Exactly. So I had to make sure to go to as many as I could because I don't want to find out that like, oh, you didn't go that night. Anyway. So there's really no other bands that are like that, because if you go see The Who on a tour, they're going to play the same amazing show every night. Like, you're not going to see one night, I don't know, if you're really perfectionist, you might hear, well, they could have done Barbara O'Reilly with a little more spark. But it's not like that in the Grateful Dead or the jam band world, I should say. Bands that have followed in their path, that don't have set lists, set things that they do, So they really opened up the world for that type of stuff, which now is commonplace.
Right. So one of your new books, Just Jerry, is all about Jerry Garcia, your pictures of him. I mean, how do you see Jerry, who meant so much to so many people and died so early, but did so much? How do you see his story?
Well, it's an unlikely story because it's somebody who became an unlikely rock star. They did everything like wrong in terms of the business. Like for example, with his first solo album, the second side of it has a lot of kind of far out music on it, like songs like E Power and all this kind of strange stuff. But the only really like melodic song on the second side is called The Wheel, which is a beautiful song. Plays pedal steel on it. It's a wonderful song. So he didn't have on the album a break, a song like We Could Drop the Needle for The Wheel. And the record company's like, we should put a space there so people could find the wheel really easy, like that they could drop it right on the wheel. He's like, no, like, things like business related, no. Or they just did a lot of things. So it's incredible. He succeeded, despite himself, despite themselves. He certainly, he lived, from what I understand, I didn't really know him. I only met him a few times, but from what I've known, he really just wanted to play guitar and be known as a good guitar player. The whole cult, God kind of thing wasn't really at all his scene. And the adoration, was not, it was kind of weird to him. It's like, dude, I'm a guitar player. I'm not a prophet. Singing a song and I'm looking forward to, having dinner afterwards, the show or something. People, but what it means to people and even myself is a different thing. It does conjure up that, those feelings because, he's the channel, for the words. Let's not forget Robin Hunter, because Robin Hunter wrote the lyrics that Jerry sang.
Right.
Jerry didn't necessarily write the music, the words to those songs. He may have had some, input and changed some things around. But, Robin Hunter, he was really the core behind the Grateful Dead because all their big songs, he wrote the words to. In 1970, just think about it, the short time period in 1970, he wrote like Uncle John's Band and, Dire Wolf and Ripple. He wrote all these songs in a short amount of time that are part of the pantheon of American, music.
Right.
It's incredible. And Jerry Garcia was the channel to bring that out to the world. Those words combined with the music and his guitar playing. His guitar playing had the dynamicism again. it's the space between the notes was just as important as the notes. The silence, the ups and the downs, the slow part building slowly into a first climax, then dropping down, then into the second. It's this. It's it's incredible. There's nobody like him. I mean, there's Eric Clapton and Santana and all the original blues players that they all copied from. Albert King, and Freddie King, and all that. But having your own voice, creating your own unique style and sound, it can be instantly recognized is not an easy feat. And Jerry sure did that.
Did you have a sense when you were photographing him of sort of trying to get behind the myth, or trying to help people see him as something besides just this legendary, adored figure?
Well, I mean, I try to put photos up that are not in a negative light of somebody, because that's just not me. Some people do it, some people, they do that. They don't have a problem with that. I sort of do. So I like getting smiles of Jerry, things like that. I mean, that's the way I like to remember it. But as a documentarian, of course, I have lots of other photos, ones I've never posted. Like I've shot Jerry a lot in 1984. In 1984, he didn't look so good. And even in my book, in Just Jerry, you won't see any pictures from 1984. You'll only see one from 1995. Of course, it's, I'm a fan too. I'm not doing it necessarily for the public,
Right.
I'm doing it for myself. And the fact that people dig it is a bonus, but if you're hoping to see certain photos, like you're not going to see those types of photos. But I did one time when I did get to have a solid hang time with Jerry. I was with my wife at Laguna Seca. I asked him, he was in a pretty chipper mood. And I asked him, so what's it like to be Jerry Garcia? Because there's you're a person like anyone else, but then there's this Jerry Garcia.
Right.
It was funny. Like I said to him, do you wake up in the morning and slip into Jerry Garcia pants, zip up the back, okay, now I'm Jerry Garcia. He was cracking up,
Did he have an answer to that?
I can't remember exactly the conversation. I wish I had a tape recording of it, but we had him for almost an hour to ourselves before other people sort of started hovering around and moved in on it. But the fact that I felt afterwards, I was a little bold to ask that question. What's it like to be you, Jerry? Well, actually, he was telling me stuff like on stage, the dynamics between the band members, how they try to trip each other up or mess with each other.
Really?
Really? That's what I said. Really? Tell me more. He goes, well, they'll change stuff on me and see if I'm like, going to follow along with it or something like that. I'm like, so there's this whole little, not war, but a whole thing going on stage. And sometimes, I used to notice that from the audience. But hearing him say it, gave truth to those thoughts. Because like unlike most bands, they didn't really play from a set rehearsed thing. So there were like one band members moving into some sort of song, and then they'll see if people are taking the bait. Maybe not. We call that a tease. Like, wow, it sounded like they were going to do, but then somebody else weighed in more heavily on something. No, let's bring it over this direction. See, that's the kind of stuff that people that don't know much about the Grateful Dead don't understand. They don't know that kind of thing, and that's exciting for an audience, for somebody to see all that occur to them, rather than a highly polished show. Like if you're going to go see a Broadway show, it's going to be the same show somebody saw a month ago, exactly the same, and it should be. That's the way it is. But in adventurous music, it's not that way.
It's controlled spontaneity.
Yeah, I'm sure they had some things, some what's that word? Formulas,
Right.
they could fall back on or go into, like we all do. We all have, things like that. But to answer your question about getting behind Jerry, I try to capture the essence of a person's, personality and subject. When somebody's looking at them, they see things in it that I don't see, That's what I like. I don't want it to be literal. Like, this is it. This is what, people conjure up when all kinds of stories behind the photo. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, you're making all that up over like a 60th of a second. His expression that happened to be at that 60th of a second, you're making a whole determination on what's happening at that time.
Right.
And that always
Right.
amazes me.
Well, you
Yeah.
see that in the news, that a certain photo will show a certain expression, that they'll put a big meaning behind it, and
They'll put a,
it's just an instant.
exactly, like, they'll show like, somebody looking angry or thoughtful or befuddled or happy, to just, to picture the article, to go with the article, what the
Right.
article is talking about, but you don't really know what they're thinking
Right.
or anything. Yeah.
Um, Another thing I find interesting is your kind of immersion in your own community. And you have another book about Marin County and the music scene there. And I'm sort of wondering how do you feel that the place has influenced the music there? I mean, is there some connection between the music that's made there and the actual geography or landscape?
Well, as it happens, a lot of the bands that I like from the 60s era, a number of them happen to just be born here.
Hmm.
They could have been born in Athens, Georgia, that has its own scene, or in Austin, Texas. Then I'd probably be living in Austin, Texas or something. But as it happened, they grew up in the Bay Area, meaning like the Jefferson Airplane, Janis Joplin, Quicksilver Messenger Service, Grateful Dead, and a number of other bands, Moby Grape and Blue Cheer and stuff like that, bands that aren't really as well known today in most circles. But so it happened to be here. So as a kid growing up, San Francisco became a place, like that I had to visit. This is where the sea happened, the whole Haight-Ashbury thing. So when I came out to visit, the other thing about this area is it's beautiful. I mean, it's a beautiful area, visually, aesthetically. It's a progressive area too. It's very, on the democratic spectrum of things, I mean, and I don't really think of it as left. I mean, I'm not a communist, but it's some people might say it's in that direction, and which fits me just fine. It's also at the forefront of healthy eating and active lifestyle, things like that. So that's just where it happened. They happened to be born, a number of them, and where it all coalesced into 60 Summer of Love and all that stuff. So Marin County, a lot of the musicians ultimately moved out of the city and into Marin County, and that's where they lived and played. So, when I created this book, it's basically Music Never Stopped, Marin County's music scene. I think what's happening, I mean, the main focus of the book is what I call the current renaissance of music in Marin County, which is basically the rebirth of the Sweetwater Music Hall in Mill Valley, and the creation of Terrapin Crossroads in San Rafael. Those two events, those two venues, which are located maybe 20-25 minutes apart, have really, to me, made Marin a place that years from now, people are going to look back on and go, wow, remember when, I mean, hopefully it won't be like that. Hopefully it'll still be happening, but, be like, wow, remember when Phil's place opened up and all that stuff was going on? So I wanted to really document it, but I started the book in the 80s, and I used to come out to visit, and then continue right on up until when the book came out around 2017. So, it's just a fact that there's a lot of creativity in a small area. I mean, Marin County is not that big. There's a lot of open area, parks and stuff, but like the central corridor, where most of the population is, San Rafael, Novato, where I live, and Mill Valley, is really a very compact area, and there's a lot of musicians live in that area. I mean, David Freiberg from the Jefferson Airplane, he lives 5 minutes from my house in Novato. I mean, Greg Allman even lived here for a while. I saw him on the street once. Like, I thought I was hallucinating. Greg Allman, what are you doing here? Yeah, he lived in Novato too for a few years. So it's just a number of things, but I think it all comes down to geography. They just happen to be born here.
Do you hear connections between the current bands and the older bands?
Well, there are the people, like I mentioned, David Freiberg. He plays in a band, in a Jefferson Starship type band, with some other, younger people, I mean, Grace Slick doesn't do that stuff anymore. You know,
Right.
she's retired. But yeah, a lot of the cats from the beginning, you know, from the early days, they do still play. I mean, Taj Mahal comes through, and I mean, you know, these names like, oh wow, you know, that person. So that still happens here on a regular basis. In fact, the last time I saw Greg Allman play, he was at Terrapin.
Huh.
He was there. He was here. I don't know what he was doing in San Francisco, and he must have been out here for something else. But he was having dinner at Terrapin that night. I was photographing the David Nelson band in the what they call the Great Room, but in the
Mhm.
bar restaurant area, somebody told me Greg Allman's here with his wife, and I'm like, he is. So I walked
Wow.
out into the restaurant. You know, he's unmistakable. And then I'm wondering, like, is he going to play or something? Because the bar has a bandstand where a band was playing. Yeah, so he joined them and actually played.
Ah,
So
nice.
things like that, like magic events like that, are like almost commonplace here. It's crazy.
But Marin is also, I mean, that's a fairly well-to-do community, right?
Yeah, well, it wasn't always that way. It used to be a place where musicians could afford to, struggling musicians could afford to live in the 70s and stuff. But over the years, it became extremely affluent. I mean, I'm lucky I'm here. I mean, I'm just a middle class guy, but
Just like Brooklyn.
Brooklyn. Well, Brooklyn's gotten, yeah, even those Brooklyn's gotten pretty high end too.
Soho.
But yeah, it is an affluent area. There's no mistaking that, and it's tough um, to establish yourself here, economically. If you're just coming here, without a
So
without,
obviously, you know, COVID has had a huge effect on the music scene and must have had a huge effect on what you've been doing because
yeah.
you take pictures of people and that means getting together with them. So how have you been dealing with that?
Well, initially, of course, I was like, holy cow, what am I going to do now? But also the musicians, what are they going to do now? And what are the venues going to do now? I
Right.
mean, we can't lose that stuff. Can't lose the musicians or the venues. And, it's a big fear. But luckily, the community has been very supportive. I mean, I'll talk about that for a second. I mean, the musicians have been doing these, online stream type performances, and you tip them, Venmo
Right.
and stuff like that.
Right.
So, I don't always have time to watch it, but I just contribute anyway, because I'm able to. So I contribute to all the musicians and the venues like Sweetwater. They pivoted. They became a nonprofit now,
Hmm.
nonprofit group. So that opens them up to certain kinds of funding that is not available if you're a for-profit. So they're going to survive. They have a consortium of partners, and Sweetwater will be back. I dropped by there the other day just to look at it, and I saw workers in there doing stuff. So that was
Huh.
like, yeah.
Oh, nice.
So Sweetwater will definitely be there. Terrapin as well. Terrapin has been shuttered on and off. So they've been doing these like socially distanced shows, but they're expensive and small amounts of people, but they have to be that way because there's no other way to do it. If you're having a place with 15% capacity, ticket price is going to have to be higher. So
Right.
that shuts out people, of course. But you know what? This all lets the place survive. So when it comes back, and things can hopefully go back similar to where they were in terms of concerts, they'll be there, and then people could enjoy them like they usually do. In my case, that photographing music came to a crashing halt, of course, and I pivoted. I put more energy into creating a store website for my prints, which has been successful.
Uh-huh.
Um, and and I've been photographing other types of things. I've been doing. I'm a pilot. I have an airplane. I have use of an airplane. I don't own the airplane,
Huh.
and a friend of mine owns the airplane. But so I do a lot of aerial photography, and that's been received well, in the world. So I've been doing that, and also other types of photography. I just been putting more energy into. I just did a shoot with the Surgeon General of California a week ago today.
Hmm.
Got hired. That's a pretty high-end shoot. She's the Surgeon General of of an important state in the country. she's female, woman of color. There's a lot of eyes on her. And I got referred to do that job, and so that was worked out really well. And I pivoted into my graphic design business, getting that more, because a lot of people wanted to upgrade their sites. People have time to think about things like that and to move their own businesses and things. Their online presence became more important. And that's why I came in to help them. So it's an adaptable, you need to adapt to do things. I mean, I'll be photographing a Dark Star Orchestra in May. They'll be back. And I'll be fully vaccinated. Yay.
Cool.
And they're playing a show, socially distanced show down in Santa Cruz area.
Huh.
And I think more and more of those things are going to start to happen, and things are going to get back to that. So I think the light at the end of the tunnel is getting brighter, and it's been a long haul for a lot of people, but, the community has pretty much been supporting the musicians by donating to them and helping them out and keeping the venues alive.
Have you thought about how artists, like musicians, are going to process this experience and what it's going to create, what it's going to result in?
Well, that remains to be seen. It had a heavy effect on them because initially they would, that's what they do. That's it.
Right.
There's no pivoting really.
Right.
So unless they're getting out of it altogether, but that remains to be seen. For some established artists, I guess I wouldn't use the word easier, but it's been like for instance, Jorma Kaukonen from Jefferson Airplane Hot Tuna. He has a really well-regarded stream every Saturday night. I mean,
Right.
it's really well produced.
Right.
Because they have a little venue in their property in Ohio at the Fur Peace Ranch. So that's been, the musicians like that and all the others really have been like a life preserver to the people who need music. I need music, right? We live for it. And the musicians, instead of pivoting into something else, I'm using the word pivot a lot, sorry.
That's okay.
Changing into something else, stuck it out and are playing for people. Some might be making some money, some may not be making so much money, but they're doing it, and they're doing it for themselves, they're doing it for us. So Jorma doesn't necessarily probably have to do it every Saturday night, but he does.
Right.
Bill Kirchen from Commander Cody's band, he does a wonderful Friday night show every Friday night. And Roger McNamee from Moon Alice, he doesn't really economically need to do this, but he plays every single night. He's done some sort of music every single night of the pandemic with either with Moon Alice or Doobie Decibel System or some other conglomeration of musicians that he put together.
Right.
And they play every single night. So they've done, close to 400 of them already.
Wow.
300 something. And he doesn't have to do it.
Sure.
He wants to do it, and he knows the impact and the healing and the goodness it brings to people. That's why he's doing it, and ultimately that's why all the musicians are doing it. So God bless the musicians.
Right. I was wondering, when you're doing, say, an aerial photo, like of the Golden Gate Bridge or whatever, do you think the same kind of aesthetic and storytelling applies? Are there different ways of thinking of a photograph, or is it all sort of the same approach?
Well, ultimately, it's the same approach in a big picture. It's the same approach. I wanted the viewer to feel like they're there. They're either there or they wish they were there. Brings them it brings them a sense of like wonderment, like the world's a great place, positivity. I mean, I'm all about positivity. Yeah, I know there's a lot of negative stuff. I have to do my taxes. I mean, read a new packet from my insurance company because they changed. There's that kind of stuff. But basically, it's about positivity and the fact that things can be better and greater and just a better world. So I'm not saying my photos necessarily convey all that, but but in a big picture, yes, there's technical aspects because I'm not in a helicopter, I'm in an airplane. The airplane's moving along at like 120 miles an hour. So, I have to maybe make multiple passes. Sometimes it's like, it's not working right. Or, the light's glinting in a funny way and I can't get that turn tight enough. I got to come back around and, oh, wait, there's another airplane coming. I got to move to the right, things like that. But ultimately, I'm trying to convey the same thing, like have this dynamic image that just fills you with a sense of wow, it fills me with a sense of wow. I look at it afterwards. I'm like, because when you're taking it, you're not as,
Mm.
you're doing it, you're looking at it afterwards. You're like, wow, you should probably go up there and not take pictures. Just, well, I did that now. Now I do that a lot. I go up on photo flights when the light's nice at the end of the day. And, so that was a long answer to your question,
Oh, I liked it.
but I think I answered it more or less.
I guess you talked about storytelling with the Dead. I mean, is there any other band that you really associate very heavily with storytelling?
Well, yeah. Another band I do, but they fall sort of in the same ilk as the Dead or genre as the Dead is the David Nelson Band, which he's the lead guitar player from the New Riders of the Purple Sage. And their songs are also stories and songs. Sutter's Mill, Finding Gold, and don't tell anybody, but he told somebody, and now everybody's coming to Sutter's Mill, and the whole gold rush happened, and things like that. And so the David Nelson Band, he sings a lot of folkish songs, but then they with a psychedelic jam spin on it. So that would be probably my favorite band to see live, these days, or in any day, really.
Okay.
They don't really travel too much. I mean, they do Hawaii, but they don't come east very often, unfortunately. But yeah, I mean, because there's other bands like Hot Tuna, but they're not really a storytelling and such, So, I mean,
It's funny that this band that was sort of so unlikely, the Dead has, even after it stopped being, it's still an incredibly powerful presence, and you have all of these splinter groups and I mean, do you have any sense of what the essence of that, just sort of, it's almost like a life force in a way.
yeah, I mean, I think Jerry's been gone for 25 years, and I think they're more popular now than they ever were. In fact, today, earlier, I just popped on Facebook and I saw that Dead and Company, which is the latest incarnation of the Dead,
Right.
their show that they have coming next year in Mexico called Playing in the Sand, sold out instantly.
Wow.
I see people bemoaning like, what? How am I going to get, and there's like a wait list and all that. So, wow, right?
Wow.
Why? Well, ultimately, it's the music, it's the songs, it's the storytelling. But psychologically, it's also the same things that attracted me as a teenager attract teenagers today. Because as I think in an interview, Bob Weir said, you can't run away and join the circus these days, right? The Grateful Dead is the closest thing you'll have to doing that. To getting out on the road, seeing them in Denver, and then down in Phoenix, and then up in Montana, in these places, running into the same groups of people again. And, you're all sort of in this world. And so I think that has a great appeal to people, people like me that have been there and want to keep doing it. And then younger people I run into that are in their 20s, that to them, it's like, why would I want to do anything else? This is like fun, it's exciting. Fun. I'm like, yep, that's what it is. Exciting and fun. And, it's a good time. And of course, it's all because of the music and Robin Hunter and John Barlow, the other major lyricist in the Dead's, their words that made this all happen. And put to the music by Jerry Garcia and Phil Esch and Bob Weir and Billy and Mickey and Pigpen. And yeah, like I said, it's more popular now than it ever was. Dead and Company tour stadiums, and they're all the shows are sold out.
Right.
For a band that, some people say hit their peak decades ago. Amazing. So it makes me feel good. I didn't follow some stupid thing.
You invested well, right?
What's that?
You invested well,
I guess so. My time, anyway.
right?
I mean, yeah,
Your energy.
a lot of energy. So, but it's good because it's still happening. You know, I used to think, wow, what happens when it goes away? It never went away. So yeah, so the story, continues, and I'm happy to be my little part of it and document it and put it out there. If people want to see more of my stuff, they can go to minkinphotographystore.com and see all my stuff.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much for your time, Bob. Really appreciate it.
That was a pleasure. It's great hanging
Yeah.
out with you this morning.
Yeah, me too.
The Story Talks Back is produced and hosted by Dave Stanton. The music you're hearing now was written and performed by Christopher Daydream. The theme music at the beginning of our show is an excerpt from Play by Merlin Twelfhoven, performed by Kronos Quartet as part of their 50 for the Future series. Please subscribe to The Story Talks Back on Podbean and check us out on Instagram. See you next time.